You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment." But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, "You fool," you shall be liable to Gehenna. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on the way to court with him, or your accuser may hand over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into a prison. Truly, I tell you, there will never get out until you have paid the last penny. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, "You shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you have made to the Lord." But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by the heavens, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is the footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from evil.
Thank you, Joni and Ron. I would never have done that when I was your age. I would have been scared silly. Do not swear by anything. Do not make oaths. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything more than this comes of evil. This is awkward because I think there's a scout oath. And I think it's pretty important, as I recall, from my days as a Weeblo. I promise I did not choose the Bible passage to be read today. If you're visiting us from another church, you'll find that at your home church they were reading the same one, most probably. The scriptures each week are decided by a calendar that most churches share. It's called the lectionary. Plus, I make it a practice never to aim sermons at anyone, especially visitors. But what are we going to do with this? Don't make oaths. Where do we go from here? Because you know what? I make oaths too. I made an oath when I got ordained. They called it ordination vows, and I take them very seriously. I made an oath when I got married, and that's a vow that I also take very seriously. Like you, I've made a few solemn vows in my lifetime, and they matter to me, and they make me into the person that I am. They're promises that shape everything about our lives, promises that we take very seriously, promises that we make. They make us, or at least they should. More than the promises we make, it's the promises we keep that make us. And all the world depends upon the making and the keeping of promises. Your parents, or maybe you yourself, made promises at your baptism. You make promises at your confirmation. You make promises anytime you sign a document. And you know what? Every time you download an app onto your iPhone, you make a promise that you and I together have never even looked at, which is the terms and agreements, or terms and conditions. Some promises mean the world to us. Others we just make like that. But what are some of the oaths, the vows, the promises that really make you the person that you are, that really matter to you? Well, let's look at it another way. When have you made a promise and then lived to regret it? Do some promises have expiration dates? Can you outlive them? There are many novels, most of them from the 1800s, about deathbed promises, and I know this because I used to be an English teacher decades ago, and so I have to tell you about them. In Jane Austen's novel Sense and Sensibility, there's a rich man who is dying, and he makes his rich son from his first marriage promise to take care of the family from the second marriage that he doesn't really like all that much. Share my wealth with them, he says, but of course you'll promise anything to somebody who's dying. So he agrees he'll take care of his stepmother and his half-sisters. But after his father's been dead for a while, he kind of starts to reason, with his wife. What does he mean take care of? What does that mean? Take care of doesn't mean like giving them a place to live. It doesn't mean making sure they have money. It means, as his wife says, giving them fish sometimes and meat. Her words, not mine. And then the book is mostly about the hardship that comes from the failure to keep a promise. And then in the wonderful novel Middlemarch, which took me 4 years to read, because I kept giving up on it and then taking it back up, and it gave me excellent sermon fodder, but it's a paperback this thick. I had to keep a really long list of characters just to keep up. Middlemarch tells the story of a beautiful, sweet, idealistic young lady who has a talk with the local minister, and the minister's kind of old and kind of serious. He's a bachelor, he never got married, and he's writing a book. And they have a talk about the book that he's writing. It's a very bad book. It's just boring and it's badly researched. It's about religious symbols and legends, and he's not a great writer. But she becomes so excited about the book that he asks her to marry him. And that doesn't go well. She quickly comes to regret her marriage vows to the gloomy old pastor. Why are pastors always gloomy in books? And now she has to spend her energetic, happy life with this serious old man, whose book she begins to realize is never going to make it to print because it's just that bad. And while she's married to him, without being unfaithful to her husband, she kind of falls in love with someone who does see her and who values her intelligence and her energy. And as the old pastor is dying, he makes her promise never to marry that guy that she actually loves, and also to publish his book. And she breaks both promises, and she lives happily ever after. Just one more, I heard a radio show about a teenage girl who promised her Mormon mother that she would remain in the Mormon church. It was very important to her mother that she be Mormon. But as this girl got older, she realized that she differed from the Mormon church in many, many ways, especially social issues. And she just couldn't accept it. And now she lives with the guilty conscience of having broken a very serious promise she made to her mother, which her mother made her promise. But the promise wasn't fair to begin with, was it, really? I mean, truly, our children are going to be who they're going to be. We can't control the people they'll become. We can influence them, and we can love them, and we can try to show them what matters, but we can't control it. We have to let them be. Promises, promises. Vows and oaths and swearing on the grave of someone you love, what does Jesus have against promises? Here we are still in the midst of the Sermon on the Mount. This is Jesus' most famous speech. But as speeches or sermons go, you would not want to turn it into your speech teacher at school. It's all over the map. Unlike a good modern speech, it's not about one thing. In this sermon, Jesus talks about love and judgment and justice and poverty and divorce and trusting God and finding peace, and mostly just how to treat people, how to behave with love. Interestingly, he says not a thing about what you're supposed to believe. He only talks about how you're supposed to live and treat other people. But this sermon is scattered. It doesn't have a single unifying theme. And what does Jesus mean when he seems to forbid the making of promises, oaths, vows? You know, this is something he must have said more than once because we find it again in the Epistle of James in almost the exact same words. And James, of course, Protestants believe, was written by the brother of Jesus. And it echoes the Sermon on the Mount in many places, sometimes word for word. But I don't think Jesus is really telling us here not to make promises. I think he's telling us, when you swear by this thing or you swear by that thing, I swear by God, I swear by heaven, I swear on the Bible, it cheapens that thing. So don't swear in the name of God, don't swear by the name of heaven or all that's holy, because none of those things are really yours. And when you swear by them, you make them kind of cheap and trite. Just say yes if you mean yes. Just say no if you mean no. I think Jesus' words here are less about making vows and more about keeping vows. When you say yes, mean yes. When you say no, mean no. Stand by your word. Don't make flippant promises that you end up neglecting. Now, I had always heard, and maybe you did too, that Richard Nixon refused to take the oath of office when he became president because he was a Quaker, and Quakers don't take oaths. But a quick Google search found that that's not, in fact, true. He did take the oath of office. Quakers are famous for avoiding oaths, and in fact, in Pennsylvania, with our Quaker roots, you can still get two different kinds of marriage licenses. You can get the regular kind, where you stand in front of me, and I witness you making your vows to each other, and I sign it and say they actually promised, and you send it into the courthouse. Or you can do the old Quaker kind, where you marry each other with no minister and with no vows. Maybe just a handshake, maybe a kiss, and you marry each other. It's a very different kind of way of doing things. It's not the making of promises that Jesus opposes. It's just the keeping of them that he wants to insist upon. And that's the sticker. That's the stickler. That's the hard part about promises. Anyone can check a box. Anyone can go through the motions of making vows and oaths and promises. But it takes a special person to look back on those and say, I gave my word. I'm going to do it. It takes a special person to think before making the promise about whether or not they should. And then saying no to those things that they probably will not follow through with. Better not to commit than to commit and not follow through. I'm not going to name names, but we had a wonderful elderly gentleman who sat in these pews for 50 years or more. Half a century he sat here. And he was one of those guys who came to church alone. His wife was not interested. For half a century, every Sunday, he would take the little pad that's at the end of every pew and he would sign in and he would check the box visitor for more than 50 years. Because he didn't want to make the commitment of joining the church, and that was fine. I was just happy to have him here. But he didn't want to commit. Everybody knew him, everybody loved him, everybody thought he was a member. But he wasn't sure about the Apostles' Creed. He wasn't sure that on the occasions when we stand up and say it, that he could join us. 2 days before his death, he finally took the vows of membership and joined the church. The church that he had been faithfully supporting and attending for decades. I didn't need him to join. I was happy just to have him here. I admired him, too, for taking commitments so seriously that he had to measure the ones he would actually take. Ironically, though, the vows of membership say nothing about what you believe. Just like the Sermon on the Mount, they're mostly about how you're going to live. But he didn't make throwaway promises. And so let me ask you again, what promises make you into the person that you are? What promises inform everything about your life? What are some of the vows and oaths that you take very seriously and could never renege upon? I bet you've got a few. I mean, the Scout oath to begin with, we hope. Wedding vows for some of us, courtroom oaths maybe. I hope the ones sitting closer to the back, the church members, take their membership vows seriously. And if you're an elder or a deacon, you took vows there too. Promises at baptisms and at confirmations and at all manner of religious events. There are promises that we make to each other and promises to our children. And as I said earlier, there are those silly, insincere promises that we make all the time online about the terms and conditions. And yet, not all of the promises we make are that fancy and formal. We undertake responsibilities that we cannot begin to keep up with. We agree to serve on committees and boards. We agree to help with this thing or that, fundraising for a cause we believe in, coaching a team, playing on a team, taking a class, teaching a class, being the parent helper at our kids' school. We make so many commitments that I think they are crushing us. I think we say yes to so many things without considering the effects of it, that it makes us tired all the time. Overcommitment is a real thing in these times. We are taking on far too much stuff. It adds to our stress and our weariness as a society, which in turn makes us grumpier and more selfish and less kind. Say, for example, you've got 3 kids, and you want all 3 of them to play at least one sport, probably 2 sports. Your life as a parent and that kid's life as a kid is going to get very full. Now, I have 3 nephews, all brothers, who each play 3 sports: football, baseball, and basketball. How they do that, I don't know. And even if there are no games and they're only practicing, that's a very full schedule for parent and child. And when they are playing games, it's a little worse than outrageous. Add to that the fact that their parents expect aunts and uncles and grandparents to be at the games. Happily, I am seen as the eccentric uncle down in Pittsburgh, so I'm off the hook. But there's more. There's more. On top of that, each kid is supposed to play a musical instrument and keep their grades up and be active in church, which I'm glad of. Church is usually the first thing to get cut. And since they're all nearing the age where they're going to go off to college, they're under pressure to have extracurriculars that the colleges like to see, and they're all thinking about getting jobs because they're at that place where they want their own money. It's too much. Even just thinking about it, it's too much. It's outrageous. It's 21st century normal. But were we meant to live this way? These imbalanced, overcommitted lives. Now, I know that sports are good. I know that sports teach us teamwork and character, and physical activity is necessary to spiritual health and physical health and mental health. I know that. But when a family's life is entirely dictated by the kid's sports schedule, what will get cut? What will get cut? Dinner together as a family probably will get cut. Maybe family activities like game night, maybe even vacations, might get cut. The time a kid needs to be alone in his or her room, just to be, to rest, to read, to reflect, maybe even to be on their phones. Time in the woods, camping, kayaking, hiking, every voluntary association that is not a competitive team sport will get cut. Religious involvement, church, synagogue, it'll get tossed. As I suppose scouting probably does too sometimes. Things that help a child find meaning and make sense of life, these are the first to go. If we took on fewer things, we could probably do better at the things that we do take on, and then have time to enjoy life. If we were more selective and intentional about the yeses that we do say, we could carry out our commitments more faithfully, and also have time in our lives for the other stuff that also matters: community, personal values, our spiritual well-being. I've wanted to say this in a sermon for decades, and I don't know that I have the nerve to say it, but I'm going to. Your child is probably not going to be the quarterback for the Eagles. maybe not even the Browns. But there will come a day in every child's life, every child, soon or late, when that child will look around for purpose and for meaning and for something to believe in, and maybe for someone to pray to. And as virtuous and good as sports are, and they are, and for as good as extracurriculars are, they will not be enough on that day, because we say yes to too many things. And we end up squeezing out and saying no to a lot of things that we will miss when we no longer have them. We end up saying no to things that matter. What if we played one sport? What if, this is hard, what if we had one social media account? Just one. Not Facebook and Instagram and all the others. I don't even know what they are. What if we had just one? What if we volunteered for just one cause that means the world to us and saved time for other things? Reddit's the other one. A woman on Reddit once wrote, "A sixth grader asked me if I would be his girlfriend. I didn't hear him well, and there was a lot going on, and so I just said yes. He said, 'Sweet.' And I never saw him again. So wherever you are, sweetheart, I just wanted to wish my boyfriend a happy 11th anniversary." All these half-hearted yeses, we just don't like to say no. It's hard to say no. We don't want to disappoint. But we need to get better about making commitments. Let's make sure that we don't take on too many things that we will fail to follow up on, or so many things that we don't have room for the things that nourish us and make us healthy and whole. Family, friends, community, nature, principles, faith or spirituality. Our future selves will be grateful if we invest in these things also. Admittedly, these less exciting things, but things that when you need them, you're glad you have. You will make a few promises that will shape the person that you will be forever. You will make a few commitments that will turn around and make you into the person that you will always be. These you must weigh carefully and take seriously. They will transform you. They will direct your future. But you've got to have room for them when they come. Let us carefully consider our commitments, our yeses and our nos. Then let our yes truly be yes, and our no truly be no. Amen.